The Pantheon in Rome is nearly 2,000 years old, and by every standard, it should be a ruin. But it's still standing. No collapse, no structural failure, nothing. Roman engineers with no computers and no steel rebar poured a concrete dome that remains the largest of its kind on Earth. We've been to the moon. We've split the atom. But we couldn't crack what a bunch of guys in sandals pulled off 2 millennia ago. Modern engineers scanned the walls, and the more they learned, the stranger it got. Because the Romans built something that heals itself. The Pantheon sits in the historic heart of Rome, on the Piazza della Rotondo. The inscription credits Agrippa, pointing to a construction date of around 27 BC. The bricks are dated to around 120 AD. Why the lie? Pantheon burned in 80 AD and again in 110 AD. Emperor Hadrian rebuilt it after the second fire, but he left the old inscription on the front. A building that appears older than it is carries a certain weight. To rivals and subjects, a temple that seems to have always been there implies an empire that will always be there. Unfortunately, the empire didn't hold up its end of the promise. But the Pantheon did. To this day, the Pantheon is an architectural wonder, even in modern terms. For over 1,300 years, it was the largest dome in the world. Even more remarkably, the Pantheon remains the largest unreinforced concrete dome ever constructed. No one in 2,000 years has attempted to beat that span without steel reinforcement. And given the building codes now in place, no one ever will. Yet the building stands. It has stood through earthquakes, floods, lightning strikes, wars, and the slow decay of 19 centuries. It even survived the centuries when Rome's temples were gutted for materials. Marble stripped, columns toppled, bronze melted. The Pantheon should have been a quarry. The reason it wasn't? In 609 AD, it became a Christian church. That single act saved it from the fate of nearly every other Roman temple. But protection came at a price. Bell towers were added. Clumsy, out of place. Romans called them donkey's ears. They lasted until 1883. Then came the bronze. The portico ceiling was stripped and melted down, giving rise to the famous line, "Quod non fecerunt barbari, fecerunt barberini." What the barbarians didn't do, the Barberini did. The Barberini were the family of Pope Urban VIII, who hauled away the ancient bronze to cast cannons for Castel Sant'Angelo. A small portion was reportedly reused for other papal works. Despite all of this, the Pantheon survived. So what did the Romans add to their concrete that let it stand while our structures struggled to last 50 years? Pozzolana, a volcanic ash from the Bay of Naples. The Roman architect and engineer Vitruvius documented the formula around 25 BC, specifying a ratio of 1 part lime to 3 parts pozzolana for structural work. Why pozzolana? Because of a simple chemical reaction. When lime, volcanic ash, and water combine, they form a crystalline structure that grows stronger when exposed to moisture. Pliny the Elder observed that this mixture, when submerged in seawater, became a single stone mass, impregnable to the waves and every day stronger. And he wasn't exaggerating. For years, archaeologists noticed white flecks in Roman concrete and dismissed them as sloppy mixing, poor craftsmanship, impurities. Then, in 2023, MIT and Harvard researchers proved otherwise. Through research, they found that those flecks were lime clasts, intentionally trapped in the mix. When the team recreated the recipe and exposed it to water, the lime dissolved, seeped into the cracks, and recrystallized. The Pantheon, in other words, does not merely resist decay, it repairs itself. Every time it rains, the Pantheon undergoes maintenance. It is quite literally made stronger by the elements. But that explains why it lasted. It doesn't explain why it stands. No external buttresses, no rebar, nothing visible holding up more than 4,500 tons of concrete but the curve itself. How on earth does it bear all that weight? The answer is simpler than you'd expect. It's not as heavy as it looks. At the base, the concrete is nearly 20 feet thick and packed with travertine, a dense limestone that anchors the structure and resists the outward thrust, straining to push the walls apart. The walls incorporate tuff as well, a volcanic stone selected for vertical compression. But these dense materials don't climb with the dome. Hidden within the base, there are grottoni rooms, service chambers never intended to hold people at all. Instead, they were a practical solution to a problem encountered during construction. The foundation kept cracking as the concrete was laid. To manage the weight, the builders created these rooms to redistribute their load. In fact, the grottoni are part of a larger architectural complex that includes the rotunda and the adjacent Basilica of Neptune. A vaulted passage connects the two, and today visitors can actually walk between them on special tours. This reveals how the Romans thought in terms of urban complexes, not isolated buildings the way we do. Now, as the structure rises, the recipe shifts. At the midsection, brick shards and tuff replace the heavier stone of the base. The mix grows lighter, the outward thrust weakens. At the crown, the weakest point of any arch, they switch to pumice and scoria, volcanic stones so riddled with air pockets they literally float on water. Pumice has an average porosity of 80%. Scoria is slightly denser with thicker bubble walls. But the materials aren't the only thing changing. The dome itself also thins. 20 feet at the base, 4 feet at the oculus. This allows weight to concentrate at the bottom where it's more suited to bear weight. So the material gets lighter, the shells get thinner. And then there's the third trick: coffers. Sunken panels carved into the dome's interior. They make the ceiling feel taller, sure, but their real job is subtraction. Each coffer removes concrete. Less material, less weight, more stability. Now you might wonder, if the coffers reduce weight and help the dome stand, why not carve windows into the dome? More light, less weight, same principle, right? Nope. Every hole that pierces the structure creates a weak point, a place where tension gathers and cracks begin. So the dome is not pierced, it is sculpted, and that sculpture follows a logic. One that climbs and thins and finally gives way to the oculus. 29 feet across, wide enough to drop a double-decker bus through, wide enough to let in the rain, the sun, and the gods. This is the final subtraction, the one that makes everything below it possible. But the oculus wasn't just about subtracting weight. It also functioned as a sundial. On April 21st, the birthday of Rome, it's theorized that the sun's beam would have aligned perfectly to illuminate the emperor as he entered the portico. Bathed in that divine light, he was no longer just a man. He became the intermediary between the gods and the people. The Pantheon, per its name, honored all of the Roman gods, but it also came to honor the dead. Raphael, the great Renaissance painter, chose the Pantheon as his final resting spot, as did two Italian kings, Victor Emmanuel II and Umberto I. Here lies the famous Raphael, by whom nature feared to be conquered while he lived, and when he was dying, feared herself to die. This line that captures his devotion to imitating nature, an ambition mirrored in the Pantheon itself, and above it all, a sightline to the gods. The oculus, unglazed, open to the sky, was a direct line to the heavens, a celestial eye through which the gods could watch over their faithful worshippers. And the metaphor holds, because the oculus is exactly what keeps the dome standing. Remove the apex, the weakest point of any arch, and you remove the weight that would otherwise drag the structure down. And yes, that means the sky falls in. When it rains in Rome, it rains inside the Pantheon. The floor accounts for this, sloped gently upward at the center, ringed with 22 hidden drains. The water hits, flows outward, and vanishes into the sewers below. The dome spans 142 feet across. Its height from the floor to oculus matches exactly. A perfect hemisphere. Earth below, sky above, measured and balanced. The gods, one must imagine, approved of the math. And perhaps they approved of more than that, because the construction of this thing, moving monolithic columns, raising a dome of 4,500 tons, pouring concrete above 100 feet in the air without modern steel framing, strains every plausible explanation. Where do you even start? The entrance. 16 columns front the Pantheon. Each one is a single block of Egyptian granite, nearly 40 feet tall and about 60 tons each. That's the height of a 4-story building and the weight of an Abrams tank. These columns were quarried in the eastern desert of Egypt, dragged to the Nile, shipped across the Mediterranean, and barged up at the Tiber. Then teams of oxen, possibly dozens per column, hauled them through the streets of Rome. It's no surprise that one of the pillars earned the nickname Pillar of Woes, also known as the Column of Matidia. Though, ironically, the central pillar is often said to bring good luck instead of bad. Then, there are the Pantheon's massive bronze doors, towering 24.7 feet high, and estimated to weigh around 8.5 tons. Despite their weight, they're so precisely balanced that a single person can open them with ease. Even more remarkably, the doors themselves, confirmed as original Roman, have remained functional for nearly 2 millennia. And that was just the front entrance. Behind those columns, the rotunda walls are nearly 20 feet thick. But they're not solid. The Romans hollowed out hidden chambers and passages inside that mass, creating a structural honeycomb. Solid walls that thick would have been much heavier than necessary and consumed far more material. By carving voids into the thickness, they reduced weight without sacrificing strength. Same principle as modern hollow core concrete. Now the dome. 4,500 tons of concrete. No steel, just wood, rope, and manpower. Here's what archaeologists believed happened. Working from fragments, inscriptions, and a fair amount of educated inference, the dome began as a wooden skeleton. A massive curved framework suspended 100 feet in the air, shaped to match every future segment of the dome. Over this mold, the Romans laid a network of brick ribs, creating a permanent skeleton that would remain entombed in the concrete after the wood was gone. With the brick ribs in place, wooden molds were positioned inside each coffer section. These negative forms ensured that as concrete was poured, the sunken panels would take shape automatically. Only then did the pouring begin. Concrete was shoveled in by hand, layer by layer, tamped down with wooden poles and flat boards to force out air pockets and compact the mixture into something solid. And then came the moment every worker must have dreaded. The wooden framework was stripped away, the scaffolding came down, and everyone stepped back to see if the math had been right. And it was. 19 centuries later, we still walk beneath that dome and look up in awe. So did everyone who came after. The Pantheon inspired almost every major dome building that followed. St. Peter's Basilica, the US Capitol, and the Jefferson Memorial all borrowed directly from its design. Among those obsessed was Filippo Brunelleschi. Lacking the lost Roman technique of pozzolanic concrete, he had to invent his own solution for the Florence Cathedral, and he did so with 3 radical innovations. First, the herringbone brickwork, bricks laid in V patterns that locked together like teeth. Then a double-shelled dome, 2 thin domes, one inside the other, connected by internal ribs. The gap between them reduced weight dramatically and gave workers a hidden passageway to move and work during construction. Then an ox-driven hoist, a reverse gear crane of his own design that could lift enormous sandstone beams hundreds of feet in the air. 3 techniques, no concrete, and still the largest masonry dome ever built. The sheer devotion required to make such a monument is astounding. Which raises a question. If we understand how they did it, if we used to build monuments in its image, why don't we build like this anymore? The answer isn't that we've forgotten. The answer is that we chose a different path. Modern architecture operates on a principle you might call designed impermanence. We build with steel, not because we don't know better, but because it lets us build faster, cheaper, and with more flexibility. Steel components are prefabricated off-site and assembled in weeks instead of months. A steel frame building can go up for a fraction of what the Pantheon cost in labor and time. And when the building has served its purpose, the steel can be dismantled, recycled, and repurposed. Nothing's wasted. Nothing is meant to last. This is not incompetence, it's a strategy. But flexibility comes with a clock. Steel corrodes. Moisture finds its way into the concrete, reaches the rebar, and rust begins. The structure starts eating itself. Modern reinforced concrete carries a lifespan measured in decades, 50 years, maybe 100 if conditions are ideal. The Romans didn't have our priorities. There was no capitalism. They weren't optimizing for speed to market or profit margins. They weren't designed for disassembly. They were designed for permanence. And every choice that looks primitive to modern eyes, the lack of reinforcement, the hole in the dome, the heavy, chunky concrete, wasn't a flaw. It was a solution. A solution so effective that we're still 2,000 years later trying to understand it fully. The people who poured that concrete are dust. The empire that paid for it is a memory. But on a rainy afternoon in Rome, you can walk through those bronze doors and stand beneath that impossible dome and watch the rain fall through the Oculus exactly as it did when Hadrian stood in that same spot. We build for the next quarter. They built for the next millennium. We asked, how fast can we build it? They asked, how long can it stand? The Pantheon is the answer to their question, and our parking garages are the answer to ours. If you like this story, hit subscribe, stay with us, and pick another video.